This is Me Before Mom, the podcast that helps moms stay connected to themselves while doing the most important job they'll ever have. And I'm your host, Bert Anderson. Hey, this is Bert, and you are listening to Me Before Mom. So I have a confession to make. I am coming to you from underneath my stairs in my basement, and I feel very much like Harry Potter right now. Why am I under the stairs in my basement? Because of a little thing called COVID-19. I'm just going to put this out there. This is a very interesting time in life, and we're living through a pandemic. And because of that, Matriarch and myself, as many of you I'm sure are doing, we are having to adjust and re-figure out how to do life. This episode, we are going to be talking about just this summer and how different it looks for my kids compared to the summers before. It's a good thing, but it's different. Let me just get to you on all of my thoughts on the way things are. So last summer, my family and I traveled east to New Jersey because we were visiting my sister-in-law because she's stationed at McGuire Air Force Base. And I'm a military brat. I graduated high school from Shawnee High School in New Jersey, which is close to McGuire because my dad was stationed in McGuire. So it was like a homecoming, not important really, but if there are any military brats listening, you totally understand how exciting it is to be able to take your children to one of the places you've lived as a child. But our trip was 18 days long, and we were driving from place to place and staying either in hotels overnight before the next leg of the trip or staying with family members. And I can't help but wonder if that trip would even be possible this summer. And the reason why is because there's just so much uncertainty about COVID-19 and how it works and what is safe and what isn't safe. You know, can you use a restroom? Do you feel comfortable using a restroom that's like, you know, off the side of the road? Like, do you feel comfortable going into the gas station? You know, there's so many unknowns that I don't even know if my family and I would like, if we'd like to do that. So many things in life have dramatically changed because of this pandemic. And it suddenly became clear to me. I was reading a Forbes magazine article about what travel will look like this summer. And I found the statistics that it listed very interesting. It said more than half of consumers, 53%, plan to get away on a summer vacation, according to a new survey by the Out of Home Advertising Association America. They're also called the OAAA. But it's a trade association representing billboard advertisers. Road trips will be back in a big way this summer, with 62% of consumers planning to travel by car for summer vacation, which is up 72% from last summer. The president of the OAAA said consumers around the country are eager to get out of their homes and travel this summer. I couldn't agree more. But there are so many things up in the air, like will there be a second wave of the virus like we keep hearing about? Or will the impending presidential election cause continued civil unrest across the nation like what we've seen earlier in the summer? The U.S. and our freedom, the freedom that we're used to, it feels rather simple and small even. The things that we were free to do before now have all these uncertainties and rules around them. So aside from the uncertainties and the rules, I do have to say that the simplicity of life now reminds me a lot of my own childhood summers. The biggest trip I remember from childhood was driving from Grand Forks to Wyoming and stopping along the way at various national parks. We slept in tents, and our Ford Aerostar was the perfect place for a bed if weather was bad, which happened more often than not. We didn't have a way to watch TV in the car, so the long travel days consisted of making up games to play with my sister or sleeping to make the time pass. It was simple. Life was so simple. Starting back when COVID was, when everything was ramping up, it was becoming increasingly apparent that the kids were not going back to school in Minnesota. And life was not going to be back to quote unquote normal with our summer sports or activities. I started to panic when I thought about the longer summer days. I had no idea what we were going to do. How would I entertain my kids? And to be honest, I really didn't want them inside watching a screen all summer, as easy as it is to let them do that. And then it dawned on me. My childhood summers rarely meant my mom entertaining me or presenting me with tons of activities to choose from. My sister and I were allowed to choose one summer school class that was fun, and I did stamping one year and theater another. But other than that, we were outside all day long. We'd roam from house to house or play in the middle of the court that I lived on. And some of my best memories from childhood were the long summer days playing with neighbors. And while so many things with COVID-19 have changed, and my kids, their summer is not going to look the same, because when they're playing with each other, they have to be aware of where they are and where their friends are. We've drilled into them to be socially distant. We've set up rules like you cannot go into each other's houses and you cannot be in a confined space. So that means they're playing outside all summer. That's where they're spending their time, is outside and not inside. But I have to wonder if COVID-19 has changed us back to who we once were in the 90s. We definitely are not always on the go now like we were before. There really is no place to go. And like I said, I'm allowing my children to play with the neighbors and their friends. But like I said, they have to be outdoors only. And for a while, when we first started letting them play with each other, I made sure that I was there, and my son was able to play with his friends first because he's the oldest. And I could trust him to understand what standing, social distancing was, and how he needed to stand, be 6 feet apart away. And it took my girls, who are younger, and maybe because they're girls and they're just kind of touchy-feely with each other, but it took them a little while longer to understand that if they really did want to play with their friends, if I was going to allow them to do that, they needed to practice social distancing and not be on top of each other. But we did it. We figured it out. And to be honest, every summer leading up to this summer, I had every intention of telling my children that they had to stay outside and they couldn't come inside until a certain time of day when I would let them come in and they could do screens. And that would last for about 2 weeks. And then life would happen, or we would go on a trip, or we would do some type of a day camp, and we'd get out of the habit of doing it. And we'd come home, we'd get back into our regular routine, and I would just be tired and not want to fight with them. So playing outside and being outdoors suddenly stopped because I got tired, because I'm a mom. We all get tired in the summers. We do. But I was really curious because I've seen people talk about how, this summer was going to look very similar to the summer of our childhood. And so I took to Facebook, and as one does, right? And I asked my friends and family if they thought that this summer would resemble the summer of their childhoods, and why. So I have to share with you some of the best answers, because they just say so much of what I'm trying to explain here. So one woman who has a blog, Shanna is her name, we will link her blog in the show notes for you, but she said that the summer will resemble our childhood summers because we all will be at home. In the 90s, there weren't really day camps like now. We were not as mobile. Family homes will be camping, maybe a road trip, spending time with the family. There won't be big events, so we'll make do with what we have. We've become such an on-the-go society that now we are going to be slowing down and enjoying our friends and family more. Another friend, Suzanne, said, there's not as many play dates, more neighborhood friendships are formed, and moms have each other's numbers, so the kids can just migrate from yard to yard as long as, you have that trust and those rules. And one guy, this is my favorite, his name is Paul. He said, I would say the 1980s, but maybe because I was born in 74. Echo many of these thoughts. My summers consisted of biking anywhere and everywhere, playing pickup games with friends, which was usually just baseball, wiffle ball, football, or basketball outdoors. Being creative and making up rules to adjust to the environment, backyards, open spaces, how many players were there, things like that. We made up our own games within the games. I do not recollect any organized activities after baseball season ended. He was a big baseball person, I guess. And our trips were up to the family cabin at the lake, which maybe was 2 or 3 times over the summer. And then he says this, and I think this is really good. He says, I remember a fair amount of freedom. And then my friend Jared was really funny, so I just had to add this. He said, we were bored, so bored. But the fact that he said we were bored made me start thinking, because I've heard from more than one parenting expert how great boredom is for the problem-solving side of our brain. There was actually a really interesting TED Talk about this, and I will be sure to link it in the notes. But the woman who did the TED Talk, Manoush Zomorodi, was talking about how boredom can lead to your most brilliant ideas. The interesting thing about today is that we brag about our ability to multitask, but I guess neurologically speaking, we're actually not multitasking at all. We're just using up the resources, switching from one thing to the next in rapid fire in our brains. So it's kind of like, remember when you were a kid and your dad told you to stop flickering the lights on and off because you'd break the light. Nobody did that. Maybe that was just mine. And I don't think the light ever actually was going to break, for the record, Dad, if you're listening. But that flickering the light on and off with your multitasking, that's what you're doing with your brain when you're multitasking. So one part from the TED Talk that I just had to share with you guys, because it just really kind of nailed this home, is one of the researchers said that every time you shift your attention from one thing to another, the brain has to engage in a neurochemical switch, or has to engage a neurochemical switch that uses up nutrients in the brain to accomplish that. So if you're attempting to multitask, doing 4 or 5 things at once, you're not actually doing 4 or 5 things at once, because the brain doesn't work that way. Instead, you're rapidly shifting from one thing to the next, depleting neural resources as you go. So when you're sitting there and you're watching a movie and you're also playing a game on your phone and you're also looking at Facebook and you're also answering an email or Googling something, you're not actually multitasking at all. The way this relates back to our kids is I really feel like, at least for myself, I have made so many attempts to prevent my children from ever being bored that I think it's actually limiting their ability to be creative. And if you listen to, I'm going to say some of the things that my friends shared that from my little informal survey, but I'm going to say some things that really, I think, drive home this thought. So we are going to be slowing down and enjoying our friends and family more. Kids just migrate from yard to yard, being creative and making up rules to adjust to the environment. We made up our own games within the games. And I remember a fair amount of freedom. Now, while we don't have all the freedom that we had when we were kids, obviously I don't want my children on top of each other playing tackle football. There's still a little bit of freedom that they can have during this pandemic, during this time of unknowns, feeling bored, but we can give them the ability to slow down and be creative with each other. And it's okay. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to let them run free outside. Being outside never hurt anyone. It makes us better. While I hate the pandemic and everything that's happening right now, and I really wish I could go back in time and appreciate what I had before COVID-19, the beauty that I have found in it is allowing my children to be bored and then watching them figure out ways to entertain themselves. I'm a glass half full girl, so, I'm always going to try to find the positive thing in it. And while it's been challenging with COVID-19, I am happy that my kids have gotten a chance to be bored and have really had to figure out how to entertain themselves. And it's a good thing. It is not a bad thing. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know, tweet me, do all those fun things. Let me know what you think. And if you're letting your kids kind of be bored this summer along with me, if you have any suggestions or games, that would be great. Let me know as well. But no matter what you're doing, especially during this time when life is hard, I know that you need to be kind to yourself. Always be kind. That's all we have. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to connect with me on bertmanderson.com, and please visit our website, matriarchdm.com, for all of the show notes and to hear other awesome podcasts.